This video is fiction and comes from my thoughts on what could happen in reality. In an alternate history, the Second Russian Civil War, titled "The Storm Gathers," unfolds as a deeply complex and turbulent event. This scenario is driven by internal and external factors that culminate in a devastating conflict. In the lead-up to the war, Russia faces a prolonged economic depression due to decades of mismanagement, corruption, and international sanctions. The collapse of oil prices exacerbates the country's over-reliance on fossil fuels, sparking widespread discontent. By the 2030s, essential services like healthcare, education, and social security crumble, leading to mass unemployment, poverty, and migration to urban areas. Discontent simmers as the populace struggles with deteriorating living conditions. Politically, Russia's heavily centralized autocratic regime grows fragile. Regional leaders, frustrated by the Kremlin's incompetence, begin asserting more autonomy. Ethnic tensions rise in regions like Chechnya, Dagestan, Tatarstan, and Siberia. Corruption further alienates citizens from the central government, giving rise to populist movements on both the left and right. These movements capitalize on the growing discontent, challenging the Kremlin's authority. Nationalist and ultra-nationalist militias gain prominence as the Kremlin's control wanes. These groups, often led by former military leaders, carve out territories, enforce their laws, and create militarized zones within Russia. Xenophobia, especially against non-Russian ethnic groups, becomes a rallying cry for these militias. The Kremlin's harsh but ineffective responses spur greater violence and unrest across the nation. Foreign powers, particularly NATO and China, begin meddling in the unrest. NATO supports some regions' independence ambitions, aiming to weaken Russian influence. Meanwhile, China aids Moscow, fearing border instability and seeking Siberian resources. The stage is set for an international proxy conflict within Russia. The assassination of a key political figure in 2035 ignites the Second Russian Civil War. Massive riots and armed clashes erupt across the country. The Russian military, already weakened by corruption and internal divisions, splinters along political lines. Some generals remain loyal to Moscow, while others join or lead militias, taking control of military bases and nuclear weapons. The Kremlin strives to maintain control over the Russian Federation, relying on loyal military forces, the FSB, and Chinese support. Their goal is to preserve Russia's territorial integrity and restore order. Ultra-nationalist militias fight to establish a new Russian state based on Slavic supremacy. They control significant rural territories and infiltrate major cities, including parts of Moscow. Separatist republics, particularly in the Caucasus and Siberia, declare independence with NATO's support. They aim for full autonomy or ethnically homogeneous states, challenging the Kremlin's authority. Liberal democratic forces, a coalition of reformists, pro-democracy activists, and left-leaning groups, seek a decentralized democratic Russia. Caught between radical factions, they fight to overthrow the Kremlin and establish a federal republic. Urban warfare erupts in cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Novosibirsk, as factions battle for strategic points. In the countryside, separatist and nationalist groups wage guerrilla warfare against Kremlin forces. Foreign intervention intensifies the conflict. NATO deploys peacekeeping forces to support pro-Western separatists, establishing no-fly zones. China sends military advisors and advanced weaponry to stabilize Moscow's government. The war resembles the Syrian and Yugoslav civil wars, with conventional battles, proxy warfare, and atrocities. By 2037, Russia's economy collapses, leading to mass starvation, disease, and displacement of millions. The control of Russia's vast nuclear arsenal becomes a global concern. Different factions holding nuclear facilities raise fears of catastrophic accidents or intentional use of weapons of mass destruction. Siberia becomes a key battleground in later years. Rich in resources, the region attracts Chinese and NATO-backed forces. Brutal, frozen conflicts ensue, with battles fought in harsh winter conditions. Control of Siberia's oil and gas fields becomes a major strategic objective. The faction that controls these resources holds the power to rebuild or destroy what remains of Russia. Finally, Moscow collapses, as the central government is overwhelmed by rebel forces. Foreign embassies evacuate, and the remnants of the government flee to a distant city, marking the end of the Russian Federation as a unified state. The Second Russian Civil War has global ramifications. Europe is flooded with refugees, while China and NATO confront each other over the spoils of the former Russia. International markets destabilize, particularly for energy. New regional powers emerge in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, reshaping the geopolitical landscape. By the early 2040s, the war winds down, but Russia remains divided into multiple smaller states. Some regions fall under foreign control or heavy influence, creating a patchwork of competing republics with their own governments and ideologies. The once powerful Russian Federation is now fragmented. The Second Russian Civil War leaves a lasting legacy, marking the end of Russia's status as a global power. The conflict reshapes world history, altering the balance of power and creating new global security challenges. The storm has profoundly changed the course of global events, with the fractured remnants of Russia becoming the focal point of a new Cold War between NATO and China. This scenario explores the deep complexities and devastating consequences of a Second Russian Civil War, challenging us to consider the fragile nature of global stability and the far-reaching impacts of internal conflicts. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts on the events covered in this video, please share them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more informative content and check out my next video, where I'll be doing a deeper dive into one of these topics.